Welcome to Mother-Daughter Projects. I'm Vicki, and there's Steph. You can see her in the mirror. And we're standing in my bathroom to share a brand new project that we built for this space. It's this wall-hung storage unit. Now, a little backstory on this particular space. Back in 2012, this bathroom was literally gutted to the dirt and remodeled. And at that time, I had the option of adding a whole bank of cabinets right here. And I decided against doing that because I thought this might make a great space for something kind of cool in the future. Well, I've had two different things in this space, and I'll talk more about that in the written post. But I really was in need of something smaller and more compact in a place where I could put some toiletries and things. The centerpiece of this build is this epoxy top. Now the colors and the design are based off of the knobs that are actually here in this bathroom. So stay with us as we go through the whole process from epoxy to hanging this on the wall. Let's get started.
We started by cutting all of our boards to size. For large pieces of plywood, we'd like to lay down a piece of foam insulation on the ground and then make the cuts. We're using a Makita track saw with track. This is super easy and an accurate way to cut. All of the cuts are 4 feet by 12 inches with the exception of the back piece, which is just under 4 feet long. The sides and inner dividers are 12 by 12 inches. This piece of plywood was in pretty good shape, so only a little cleanup sanding was necessary. This rigid, battery-powered sander is my go-to sander of choice. With all the cuts made and the sanding finished, it was time for a dry fit. Yes, everything fits. On to making the epoxy top, starting with 2 coats of Stone Coat Countertop epoxy undercoat in white. This will give a nice base for the epoxy. I didn't want epoxy on the edge, so I'm covering all the edges with frog tape. I found this tape is easiest to remove after the epoxy dries. I'm using Stone Coat Countertop epoxy. I waited until the temperature in the garage was consistently over 65 degrees before starting. I laid out all my supplies, including PPE. As with any epoxy product, be sure to read all the label cautions before using. With the PPE on, I mix the epoxy at a 1-to-1 ratio. That's a silicone pad under the epoxy, which makes any spilled epoxy cleanup a breeze. Also, the garage door is open and air filtration is on while I'm mixing epoxy to keep the air circulating. And mix. I always read the epoxy label to determine how long to mix the epoxy. I mixed for 5 minutes. I poured the clear epoxy into 4 separate containers and mixed in metallic pigments. The largest amount would be the base color. Now for the fun part. I added the base color first and spread with a yellow plastic spreader. Then I randomly added the other colors. I used a heat gun to get rid of the bubbles. This epoxy pour produced what I thought was an excess amount of bubbles, which took a long time to remove. Now we wait. I wanted to make swirls in the epoxy, but for the swirls to hold, the epoxy must be a bit tacky. I set a timer and walked away for 1 hour. Here I'm testing to see if the swirls, which I made with a pencil eraser, would hold. I left the test for a bit and then came back to see if they had held. Once I was sure the swirls would hold, I worked on the entire piece. The swirling meant I had to remove even more bubbles. Ugh, I removed this tape way too early. I should have left it another hour or 2. It was at this point I realized I made a rookie mistake in not making sure the table was perfectly level. The epoxy continued to drip off onto the left side, creating this mess on the underside. We used a hammer and chisel to get off the drips. After that, a bit of sanding removed all the rest. Before we assembled the unit, we edge banded all of the exposed plywood edges. Edge banding is simply ironed into place. You simply iron it into place and smooth it with a brayer. We had difficulty trimming this with an edge banding trimmer, so we ended up trimming with a utility blade, which we had fitted with a brand new blade. That worked quite well. Time to assemble. Steph added pocket holes to the back piece. We are using an older version of a Craig pocket hole jig, which works perfectly fine. Assembly was with glue and screws. Brad nails were used on the sides and inner dividers. We marked the placement of the inner dividers and put them into place. Now, time to fill in the cracks and paint. A caulking tool made this super easy. I found that this little mini spatula made it a little less messy to use the wood fill. I used my primer of choice, this Kilt's product. It goes on easy and dries quickly. This is Steph's interior wall house paint, but it's a good match for the colors already in my bathroom. With that dry, it was time to add the top, which we wood glued into place as well as screwed in from the back. With the unit upside down, it was easy to paint the bottom of the top and the edge. With everything dry, we took it into the bathroom to hang. We had previously located the studs so that we didn't have to use wall anchors and could just screw it into the wall. Steph managed to do this all by herself. And here it is! There's lots of counter space and lots of room for essentials.
What we learned, we used a brand new product to us, Stone Coat Countertop Epoxy. Now they sent this to us. We were under no obligation to do a video or a post or anything like that, but we wanted to share kind of our experiences with that. We've used a couple of different kinds. Last one we used was Total Boat for actually the project inside the closet. But this one I found a little bit more difficult to use. And mainly, and it produced a lot of bubbles. And I haven't, with the previous two epoxies I've used, I didn't experience that. I did follow the directions exactly. I made sure that the garage was 65 degrees or warmer for a consecutive 3 days. I made sure to warm the epoxy. So I did all the things, I stirred it correctly, still lots of bubbles. And if you look close, you'll see that there's still a lot of bubbles. So that to me was very frustrating to do that because it took a lot of effort, and anytime you touched it, which I did, it would continue to bubble. So for that reason, I'm not sure I would use it on a very big project. I probably would use it on a smaller project because it'd be a lot easier to do the bubbles. Now, one of the things I did learn about this is to create these swirls in here and have them stay, you have to let the epoxy sit. And I mean sit. Set a timer on your watch, walk away, it's hard to do, and just let it sit. Now I let it sit for an hour for it to start to tack up, and then I did the swirls. That didn't work. Once I came back, it all was kind of mushed and the definition was gone. So I left it 2 hours and did it, which seemed to work. I probably would do it, let it sit even longer than that. The instructions make it seem like it's going to set up really fast and you've got to do everything quickly, but you really do need to let it wait. And I think that's all epoxies, that you have to let them wait to come to tack so you can make the swirls and then they will stay. Now, one other thing that I learned, this company promotes this as fume-free, where you can use it inside the house. Yes, it's fume-free, but when you read the labels on all three sides of that label, there are warnings. You know, don't breathe the fumes, make sure you're wearing the appropriate PPE. So even though it says it's no fumes, you really do need to be protecting your lungs, your hands, all of those things. Do protect yourself. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I love making this. I love it in the space. It is absolutely perfect. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. But we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
What's in your arm, Mom?
Paint. I was painting a few things. And it wouldn't come off because, you know, primer and paint in one does not come off. So that's what that is. I didn't think you could see it. Okay. Could you see it really?
When you did like that, yeah.
Okay.